I think as an industry, we have a major challenge in front of us.
We need some more ammunition to bring a younger crowd into this industry.
There's definitely an age gap and an experience gap in the field landman side of the business.
It's different than when we started. We're trying to navigate how you train someone in a digital age versus when we came in.
What we've done to ourselves is we've handicapped ourselves as an industry in the field side of things.
We need landmen to help other landmen.
Land insights, market trends, industry experts. Welcome to the Land Department Podcast, the state of land and energy as we see it.
Give us the backdrop, Brent. You were talking to somebody about puppy mill. What was it?
Yeah. So we, you hear comments and stuff like that, and you always wonder what the perception is, right, of your company and of our business in general. And I think it kind of came about also, now that, the Landman TV show is coming out, there's just talk about landmen and whatnot. And one of our managers saw somewhere on some post about, puppy factory, and that's what Dudley Land was. And it implied that we just hire a bunch of young folks, and inexperienced people and bill them out at high day rates. And, that couldn't be farther from the truth. And in fact, we talk all the time about how can we get young people, new people to enter the business. We talk about it a lot. We need it. There's definitely an age gap and an experience gap in the field landman kind of side of the business. So thought it'd be a good conversation. We talk about this stuff a lot internally. When people ask us all the time about it, at times we have people that are interested in getting in the space, especially in the last year or so. We're starting to hear more interest, but really the conversation always turns into, do we have the right kind of project? How can we train them? What it takes to train them? Can we pay them enough, for it to be viable for them in the long term to make a career out of it? So there's a lot to unpack there, and it's a pretty good conversation. I asked Steve to jump in because he's got such a great perspective for, the eastern and northeastern half of the country. And so we figured we'd just jump in and kind of talk about the field landman and staffing and recruiting people into our side of the business, and what we've experienced. Want to talk about day rates, want to talk about all those things that are factors when it comes to someone making a decision to, start a career in the land profession.
Do you think it's just price? Like, why are there just less young people? Is it because there have been downturns in oil and gas? What do you think it is?
Yeah, what's ironic is when we started, there was a huge age gap, and you were either 25 or you were 55. And so then for years we went through the training process, brought in a bunch of people and sent them through our energy force class. And so we got this civilized workforce, and for the most part in each different region. And then you had 5 downturns over the past decade. We had the projects and the sizable projects and clients who were willing to, help us pay for those folks so they could have that workforce. And, you get to be our age, you've gone through how many times of not having work, and now you're married, you have kids, mommy and dad, you need stability and benefits and something that's, you can work 5 days a week. And so a lot of people left the industry. So now we're trying to bring in young folks, and it's worked to a certain extent, but just not on the scale that we needed to. Right. We can't just bring in 40 people like we did in the past and get 25 out of there that were worth anything. It's 4 at a time, 5 at a time, finding a mentor in the field. Maybe they have a son, nephew, cousin who wants to get in, and you're kind of pairing them up together. So it's a real slow build, instead of if you had to staff a 100-person project and bring on 20 young people, we don't have that ability anymore.
Well, also there's a difference now in how people are entering, right? Like what was it? What were the first projects you guys worked on when you were entering the industry, and how does that differ from what people are getting into now?
Yeah, so there's been an evolution of just the type of work, right, that we do. I mean, obviously when Steve and I and many of, the folks that are in their 40s in the field side of the business, that was a shale place, and they were big and they were all over the country, and they needed resources and they needed people who could travel and go to these locations. And so it was perfect for young person coming out of college or out of high school that wanted a job and can make good money. And there was endless opportunities, right? All kinds of opportunities for growth, and you could progress people with paying their day rates or increasing their day rates. You could do it quickly. Um, Now, I mean, with exception of some hotspots within the country that dictate larger and kind of warrant, larger crews, and projects are much smaller. They're much more technical. They're more challenging. They're more difficult. They're more time sensitive. They're more costly if you make a mistake. So, it's hard to, I think of like Texas outside of if you've got maybe a big leasing project on a natural gas play or something along those lines. Um, it's difficult to have it's not common to have a big project. And even if you do have a sizable project, sizable for us now is 10 people, and they better know what they're doing, right? Because a mistake is very costly. Um, so, there's a lot of factors at play. That is certainly one of them, is the type of work that we have, the size of the projects are much smaller. But it still doesn't negate the fact that we have to bring in, a new generation of people in our business. And you can't get around the commitment that we have to make. And I think it's one of those things that's going to require industry support. And it's going to require commitment from other field landmen to mentor someone. And it's going to require, folks that are either leading crews or running brokerage shops to invest in supporting those people, and helping along their development.
And I think Khalil has a background. So if you go to school for a PLM degree or land management degree, you're, Brent, maybe I'm wrong, but 95% you're going straight in house. You're not experiencing any field time. So the folks we have, although they may be college graduates or have elevated degrees, they're coming from either being in a place of Texas or Oklahoma or one of the oil basins, knowing the land business, understanding that their parents did it, their uncle did it, or you're a family member, like in the Northeast, you're a family member, friends, something of that, who, hey, this is what I do. You got nothing else going on. Why don't you try it? I think you'd be good at it. The field guys, there's really no conventional way, like a path in school for how you become a field agent. So it's word of mouth, or the industry. And my worry about what Brent said about the Landman show coming out is, I don't know about you, Brent, but I've never seen a pump jack on fire in the middle of Texas when I go out to do anything. So I'm really wondering how it's going to paint Landmen.
Whatever it takes to draw awareness and just engagement for the profession, let's do it. Get the young people involved.
At this point, I mean, I've wanted to blow some things up, like maybe when my Excel spreadsheet crashes and I lose, 6 hours of work. Like I'll blow something up at that point.
Yeah.
But that's about, that's about that's in some cases the highest level of excitement you're going to get.
It reminds me, we had Mike McConnell on. He was the energy management program. He's the energy management program director at University of Oklahoma. And he was talking about going where the jobs are, but also talking about how being a landman was so valuable for his development as a professional. And it just seemed like, wow, more young people need to do this, even if the long term isn't necessarily in land, but even just for understanding energy as a whole. I mean, if there's not a pathway, how do you create that? Like, what is the typical pathway for a young guy that does go in the field? Are they just not getting the right kind of work? Are they, because they're not good enough and they don't have the experience?
Yeah. I always tell everybody, and I talk to a ton of people, there's interest, right?
Okay.
There's people who are interested in the business. And I talk to a ton of young, college students. They come to our NATE party every year. We always invite the energy management program guys and girls to join us. Talk to friends of friends, to Steve's point. Maybe they have a relative that's in the business, or they have a friend that's in the business, or they met someone. The hardest part is getting in. The hardest part, we always say, is getting that year of experience to where you're knowledgeable enough. Because again, to Steve's point, there's not a curriculum that really prepares you, and has an alumni that'll support you out, on the field side of the business. In-house, it's a whole different game. I mean, in-house community, the company community really supports their alumni. They support their students. They pay them extremely well out of college. It's a great job. But on the service side of the business, it is what it is, right? We're here to serve. We're independent contractors. They hire contractors because they need to be disposable. They need to use them when they need them and not use them when they don't. And so it's hard for the typical, like a successful person, starting in the field to get that year under their belt has to have some luck. They have to be working for a shop that's got enough work, maybe have a personal relationship with someone that can help bring them up and support them and look out for them and help steer them in the direction of projects that'll allow them to develop. And they need to be, obviously all the things, work the hardest, ask the most questions, be personable. You know what I mean? Don't be an a-hole. Like I always say, like, don't be a prima donna, put your boots on and go to work. They have to have that mentality because you're going to do the grunt work.
Yeah.
And you think grunt work in-house as a young landman in-house is hard. It's even worse because hell, they're hiring us to do the crap they don't want to do. and so it can be monotonous. It can be very much administrative support wise, but man, once they get that year of experience, Steve can attest, it just builds, man. Your momentum builds, your capability builds. You learn more of what you don't know. You learn when to ask questions. And, that's at least typically what we see. Steve's been able to, their projects are a little bit bigger up in the Northeast. Steve, maybe share some of your experience on success stories, at least maybe guidance for some young landmen on, what's worked for your people that you've been able to bring in.
Sure. I think I go back to when we were young guys in the field or first in the field. I mean, I think I started at $125 a day with a little per diem. And in my mind, I was making $1 million, right? And it was patience, hard work, right? Being with the right people who were there to guide you and train you in the field and show you the ways around of the work that you're doing. The patience aspect is what I don't see anymore. It is, I get in here for 4 months or 6 months and instantly I feel like I should be making twice what you are. You got to put the work in to get to those higher levels. And if you find those folks, which we've been lucky here and there to do, up here in the Northeast, and we're very blessed that we have some clients who are willing to work with us and go, hey, we understand that we need the newer generation to cycle in. It might not be at the 20 a click anymore, or clip, but if we can get 4 or 5 every 6 months, then they're dedicated to those clients and those projects, then, after a couple of years, you all of a sudden have a newer force, or maybe you're high grading your talent that are become complacent and haven't put the same amount of work ethic in that they used to have. But to Brent's point, the larger projects, it is easier to navigate that. In the renewable side, we've been fortunate 1 or 2 at a time to bring in these folks. But again, it's not building a workforce as it used to be. It's hopefully latching onto that A candidate, that A player that you can really mold and understands that there's a future and that there's a upward mobility if they just put the time and effort in.
Yeah. And you need some luck with the right kind of projects, right? You gotta have that fall into place. Well, we see less, I guess, vocal and outward support down here in the Southern US from our clients, I guess, to bring in young guys and girls, men and women into the profession. There are a whole bunch of 15, 20-year field landmen out there, respectively, right? And they're capable and they can get things done. So, I don't hear any clients when I say, man, I need some young folks. None of them come out and say, hey, man, I've got this job. Why don't you bring one of them on? Find a way for them to work. You don't hear that. But you also don't have the big jobs where you can be vocal about, hey, I've got a good opportunity here, a good candidate. I'd like to give them a shot. For lack of a better term, I mean, it's much easier to absorb someone in a bigger crew than it is, when you've got a small one-off project. One thing I want to add to Steve's point, if we're just talking about general advice for someone wanting to get into the business, the one place, the one segment of our business and our workforce that is direly in desperate need of people are those people that can travel. Gone are the days where being a field landman meant that you packed up and went wherever the job was. A lot of things have changed that. Obviously, the ability to do research online is a big deal. Projects not popping up all over the country anymore like they used to is obviously a big deal. COVID happened. The age gap, most landmen that are in the business now are, our age. They have families. They got soccer practice, parent teacher conferences. They've got all the things that, they want to do and enjoy being with their families, and they're not willing to go work on a project for a week or two, even a week or two. Like it's unbelievable. I mean, we put out posts all the time within our workforce. Hey, are you willing to travel? We need some people that can travel here. And there's not a willingness to kind of be committed to it and say, hey, hand up, not hand out. Hey, I'll go. Let's go. I'll do it. You got to beg and plead. And even at that, sometimes people just aren't willing to do it. So if you're a young landman, you've got a year or two experience and you want to provide an opportunity for yourself to grow and advance and become that person, that valuable person. If you're willing to hit the road, be vocal about it, you'll get a tremendous amount of opportunity and more experience than you can imagine. Because if anybody in our workforce comes out and says they're ready to travel, well, we're in love with them immediately. And you get we'll bump that you get raises. We pay people much more to travel, frankly. And they're worth every penny.
I think we were pretty fortunate at the time we got into the industry, right? Because we still had the books, and we were always in the courthouse, and you were meeting people in person. And then we moved into some technology, and then the technology just kept growing. I can't imagine coming and now getting trained via Teams or over a computer. I feel like you need that in person. You need to be able to know what you're looking at or where it came from. So that's probably a struggle that the younger generation or the remote generation has to deal with. A lot of folks since COVID don't want to meet in person. You don't need to go to their house. Email me this, text me this. I mean, it's different than when we started. So I think that if you can have that person who's willing to get the learning aspect in person as well as remote, or shows the want to actually go out and talk face to face and sit there and have a cup of coffee with a landowner. I mean, it's a different time than when we started. So I think we're trying to navigate how you train someone in a digital age versus when we came in.
I think it's a big disadvantage for not just, the younger generation in land, but younger generation period. I mean, so much of the education now is done online, and I feel like you're missing out on some crucial aspects to just social interaction and just even the ability to cut it up with people. Like, you don't really get that on Teams. So it's a really interesting, dilemma for that generation that they're going to face. And like you said, Steve, it is hard to find people that are smart, hungry, and coachable and have that patience to think, I don't need to be making like my goal salary right out of college. Like, I can build up to that over time. And I'm really supposed to be learning in these first few years, not earning. So
I was really excited that we have a young lady, and I won't mention her name, but she came in. She's not extremely happy with what she's doing. She's looking for something new. She's worked with us in the past over a few summers, and she's like, I just want someone to teach me something that I'm interested in. And I'm like, you know what? If you're moldable, we're willing to take that on because you have the drive and you have the want, and you're literally telling me you want something and this interests you. We can work with that. Right? If you give me 10 of those every 6 months, that would be fantastic. But it is a special, mix of ingredients for this younger generation. I hate to keep saying younger generation, but I'm so mad that my children will never have to carry 15 textbooks in their backpack to and from school. Like, I learned the other day that everything's on
up to their.
I'm like, what do you mean? I said, no, you have to carry that huge math and history book. Like, this is yes.
I mean, developing scoliosis in your childhood is like, that's a normal thing.
That's
like,
how I got
plantar
fasciitis, Brent. That's all those textbooks.
Yeah. They'll have to go uphill both ways, 2 miles to school, and snow above their waist. Yeah.
What's 8-year-old doesn't need a good, ruck every day around the hall.
You don't have to go get in the paper, grocery store bags to make for your book covers.
Yeah. Oh, dude, if you had that fold down, that was money.
Mm-hmm.
It all changed when they had the ones that you could pre-buy and they had the lines and you knew where to
Oh
fold
no,
it and
you
everything.
need to duct tape that stuff like every 2 months. Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Man. So
Yeah, and it's what I don't want to what we're not trying to convey is that the younger generation isn't capable of doing this job.
No.
This younger generation is so capable and so much more prepared. They are prepared. They're technically savvy. They're very smart. Um, a certain percentage of them are very ambitious, right? Um, it's just, I think as an industry, we have a major challenge in front of us. And Steve hit on it too, is like, how do you train a field landman now when you can't just put them at the hip with somebody in the courthouse and they can start by just running names. And then next they're indexing a document. And then before you know it, they're chaining title, and then it progresses and builds and they're next to the person. And I can say, Khalil, what does this mean? You know, you can't do that anymore. It's rare and rare. You can't send a trainee to someone's house. You know, hey, go to this person's house and sit in their their office and work with them. You know, it's just it's a difficult thing to do, to ask someone to do, because hell, we can say it. We've got people in 30 different states that work for us, live all over the country. You don't have these hubs of people working generally in the same part of the world. Unfortunately, training is for independent contractors, for brokerage companies, is a serious concern from a Department of Labor standpoint. We can't risk. The Department of Labor dictates that you can't train people to do their work and still call them an independent contractor. Department of Labor calls that an employee. Therefore, an employee, if they're an employee, you have to pay them as such and offer them benefits as such. And that's all fine and dandy. I would love to employ, hundreds and hundreds of people. Our clients, the day rates, unfortunately, that are out there don't support that. The cost to employ someone goes up every year by double digits. In all honesty, our insurance rates go up double digits every year. Subscriptions, everything's a software as a service. I got companies every year increasing our rates that they charge us for services that we have to have by 5 to 7% every year automatically. And these are things that are required for us to do things such as submit our invoices and, build production reports and do all the things that we need to do. But unfortunately, day rates haven't gone up, proportionately. And it affects a lot of different things. Our ability to employ these people and bill them accordingly. Our ability to show a future where a young landman coming into the field side of the business can make a respectable and decent and honest living. I've got 25 years of data in our land system and our billing system that shows that day rates have effectively stayed flat for the last 15, 20 years. And there's a whole lot of factors that, lead to that. Competition is one of those things. There's a broker around every corner that's willing to do it cheaper. But what we've done to ourselves is we've handicapped ourselves as an industry in the field side of things. If you hire a young landman, a young field person, and they're ambitious, they have a college degree, they want to make a good living, they want to buy a house and live the American dream and raise a family, and not have to have both of the parents working full time everywhere. And you tell them that the most you'll make is $105,000 a year. That is not an appealing thing for someone who's bright and ambitious and young and wants to work. It just is what it is. $100,000 now is not what it was 15 years ago. And I guess as an industry, and until we can get to the point where we can recognize that and do something about it and not undercut ourselves and, and just bow down to what's pushed on us from a rate standpoint, I don't see how we can dig out of it, in all honesty.
Is this a conversation you're having with other brokers?
Yes. It comes up all the time. It comes up when you get busy, like the last couple of years. We've had And obviously we've talked a lot about Dudley's consistent growth as a company, and we're not the only ones, right? We're not just, this anomaly. It's the business has grown. Renewables has added a demand for landmen. A lot of good companies out there, but when you get to this point where you're at this consistent level of growth, and volume of work, um, you end up with people in the business that are here that are still doing it, willing to work for, you know, less money, but maybe what they're doing, they're double billing. We hear a lot of talk in the business about people billing 2 and 3 projects at once. Your deliverables are less polished than they once were. Um, People can't recruit young landmen. I hear this. I have this conversation with brokers all the time. Our counterparts in the space. Um, and so you'd love to bring in some new people and invest in them and train them and show them a high ceiling, but they're not willing to do it, unless they're just, and maybe in a good place and are okay with that ceiling. Um, and so it's causing a lot of problems, and everybody's feeling the pain. The product suffers, our ability to staff suffers, the turnaround times suffer because you have to wait for a good landman to come available to start on a project. So these are all things that we're trying to find creative ways to solve. Steve and Brandon and I talk about it constantly. And we're pretty crafty fellas, and we've been doing this a long time. And I can't necessarily say that at this point we have the answer or have been able to put something into practice, large scale, that really addresses the issues that we're all facing.
We had dinner with a real good friend of ours it was a field landman for a long time, and then he got an in-house job. And we had a deal with their company, and then there wasn't another project after that. And there was like some price concerns, and others, like Brent said, everyone around the corner is cheaper. But he made a really good comment at dinner. He goes, a lot of the folks who are in-house who don't have that field experience, they call themselves landmen and they're landmen. Then landmen need to be helping other landmen, right? We need the support of our clients and these in-house land folks to stand up for these field agents and go, you know what? That we need higher rates. We need some more ammunition to bring a younger crowd into this industry. So I thought that was a pretty good comment that he had of we need landmen to help other landmen.
Another thing that I've noticed as well, and just reflecting on this again as part of the conversations that Steve and Brandon and I have regularly, when we started our careers and for the first good solid half of our careers, land departments often were run by landmen. You VPs of land were landmen. There was a value and an appreciation for what a field landman did. As the industry got more segmented, as more, not to bash engineers, but as more non-land people started fulfilling these VP of land roles and these leadership positions in land, as projects matured and there was more value, and it was required to have an engineering perspective to really build an operational efficiency for developing these assets long term. The appreciation for what land provides and the value for the understood and embraced value of your field personnel diminished. How do you appreciate something if you don't know about it? If you look at it as a dollar and cents thing because you're having to streamline your efficiencies and squeeze every penny out of your project that you can, or out of your vendors or your services or your capex as you can, why would you be willing to give your broker a 10% raise on their day rates when there's some other shop that you can go hustle up that'll do it for cheaper, right? And so I very much noticed over the last 5, 8, 10 years that to be more of the trend. Less support and understanding and appreciation for those field people to embrace them and support them. I think of like the ultimate champion for the field landman in my career is Jim Dubry. Steve Brandon and I talk about him all the time. He was an absolute champion for the field land profession and for Dudley Land and other shops that they work with that ran a good shop and invested in their people. And it was never, hey guys, I need you to cut your rates. It's like, hey guys, are you able to take care of your people? Are you losing people to other jobs? There was always, it was more like, hey, if I can pay you guys more, can you get and put better people on our projects? And there's still some of those out there. And you see that in some of the very successful companies that are prospecting and developing projects. We have some of them. We have some clients that are fantastic. They'll tell you, hey, I want to pay you more because I want the best people you got. And they know and trust that we'll provide that. And gosh, those are dream clients to work for. And we've been fortunate to have a couple of really good long-term relationships with those type of companies. That's not always the case. And that's not the sentiment that we hear generally across the board. But that's on us. You asked Khalil if we talk about this with other brokers, and that's on us to steer that narrative, right? We have to be vocal about what it takes, what we're experiencing in the workforce, what we think we need. Talking against the narrative that if just because maybe we bill a client more money, that doesn't mean we're taking more money. All that passes through, and there's a level of trust there, right? And you got to build and cultivate that.
So are these conversations also at the association level, like where there is a mix of the in-house and the field, or no?
I don't know. If you go to an association event here, or I would say in Houston, it's mostly the brokers talking to each other about it. Usually the conversation goes on somewhat deaf ears if you're trying to bring the in-house crowd into it, just because it's not, I don't think they don't want to hear it. It's that they almost don't want to deal with it because they know they have, another piece of who's willing to do it. I don't think that there's some kind of evil collusion going on between brokers, but at some point there has to be we hear it all the time. Are these rates working for you? No. Are these rates working for you? Hell no. I mean, so I don't know the answer to the day rate raising. Like Brent said, I think we need to be the example and we need to bring it to some kind of forefront. And I know that everybody else is feeling the pain of it as well. But again, if you can lay out numbers and show your clients that, hey, these people have been at this for this many years. We've maybe been able to give them a small incremental raise as we've come out of COVID, but most of our contracts are year by year, if not longer. So, that money, if we ask you for extra money, is not going into Dudley Land Company's pocket. That money is passing through to your landmen for their loyalty and for their abilities that they've gained over this period of time. Do you want to keep these people and do you value them? Right. And if you do, I don't think it's that small or large of a task to ask them to give an incremental raise on a yearly basis. Or, you know what? Hey, this guy really did well. I need you to bump him up at this point of the year or whatever. I mean, that's what used to happen, 10, 15 years ago. People recognized the value that we brought, and it was seen on a much granular scale than I think it is today.
I mean, clients have pressures too. I mean, this isn't a bash our partner session. It's really to Steve's, point earlier. We put a lot of thought in how we have this conversation and how we should properly have this conversation for it to be, provide some value and be a meaningful conversation. One of our core value pillars is the example. Be the example, and that addresses a lot of things for us. It's the work product that we put out, how we present ourselves to the industry and to the profession, and maybe sometimes what we are willing to do is stick our neck out there for the benefit of field landmen and the profession in general. And so this is something that we put a lot of thought into, and we're going to continue to work to try to champion and build and garner support for the profession. And it can't just be a conversation about we need more money. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not a good enough argument. My kid asked me for some money to get some Raising Cane's, and if he asked for $50, I'm like, I'm not giving you $50 for Raising Cane's. You're getting a 10 spot,
Dad, a 5-piece costs $20 now. I need a Coke. Come on.
Exactly. But I think it's on us to, to really put the narrative out there and
Yeah.
have a conversation about, if you're going to pay landmen more, it's really, you should expect to get more, right? You should expect to get a better product, a more committed workforce. Um, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about how they can, um, how they can look at the value that their brokers create. It's are you getting a good product for the money you're spending? Your day rate can be $50 a day cheaper, and it takes 3 days longer to get the product, and you got to spend more money and time, processing that product. Well, you're not saving money, right? And so I think as an industry, we need to focus on efficiency and quality of product. And if you're going to bill your clients more, well, then they deserve to get a more timely product, a more clean product, a product that they're not going to have to pay attorneys extra hours to clean up at a day rate per hour, essentially. Um, and so those are all conversations that we need to have and we're going to have, and we're going to continue the discussion. We're going to
Yeah.
present some facts about our metrics, our day rate statistics. We've gathered a lot of that information. I mentioned we got 25 years worth of bill rate data. And we're going to present it. We're going to put it together and put it out there. And our hope is that it at least starts a narrative and starts a discussion based on realities. Ultimately, hopefully it does something for the field landmen.
Yeah. I mean, really what we're talking about is the future of the field landman. It is, increasing prices is probably one of those things. But if you don't do that, you're not, well, like we said earlier, you're not going to be able to get the younger generation in. It will become that puppy mill or factory, like we talked about the front end of the episode. So it's really about that investment in the future of the profession. If it's valued, if it's something that's going to last, then it has to be valued monetarily as well.
I like Brent, to your point. I mean, we've always faced the battle of, well, your rates are high, and I'd love an open conversation with a few clients of how day rates do not correlate to final cost of a project. And I think those are some metrics we can also put together of, are we comparing apples to apples here on day rates, or are we comparing apples to apples on overall cost of your project in whole, right? If I was able to finish this many abstracts, buy this many acres of leases versus what our competition does with my higher rates or their higher rates, I mean, you got to be able to compare the final cost and an overall product to, and almost forget about the day rate aspect, in my opinion.
Yeah. Steve, what do you think? What are some of those kind of metrics that if you were advising a client on what they need to be monitoring and how they might go about monitoring productivity, value for the dollar?
Sure.
Right.
I mean, I think it's probably different in regions, but I mean, cost per acre from lease buying, definitely. If you're doing by abstract, by parcel, we can easily track those costs, and anyone should be able to track those costs. Landman days spent versus total cost. Just because you have a day rate doesn't mean that's what your average per day is. So there's a number of others I'm sure we could go with some other aspects, but in reality, there's you're buying a lease, you're running title on it. How much did that cost on a per tract basis in whatever format you want?
Yeah. I think another factor, and I'm not, our attorney buddies say this all the time. We have this conversation with them regularly. What is your attorney bills rendering a title opinion on a broker's abstract? How do they vary between abstracts, right? Between brokers. If they're taking a subpar product because maybe you've got a subpar deliverable, or you've got, people billing twice as much, right, to get that product out the door. And the attorney has to spend twice as long, opining to that or going through and rendering an opinion on that product. So work product quality is a big deal from the broker side, and it may cost you more because you have a higher day rate, but you're going to save a tremendous amount more money because your attorney is not having to trudge through a terrible product. So, a cheap day rate doesn't mean you get a cheap day rate and a good product. And the extra, you're talking hours of extra time on an attorney side of things that costs far more than, $50 a day more on a day rate for a landman. That's a factor, something that can certainly be measured and should be measured. I think you talk through some of the things that we see on our end. Steve mentioned tracking on leasing jobs and cost per acre, but it's how much processing of that product do you have to do? What does that given broker deliver you kind of as a line yacht, right? Does that broker pay and support and build their own systems, where you have access to organized data that can report cumulatively? What capabilities does that shop have? Are you just living off of a spreadsheet that's vulnerable to all the things? My opening, explosion thing when my spreadsheet blew up, there's value in the money that a broker is investing in building and running a good shop. And recognizing that value and recognizing that investment that the broker is putting into running their company is ultimately for your betterment, for a better product, better deliverable, better insulation from issues, right? More qualified people. Do they put and invest dollars in properly vetting their workforce, or is their workforce, proper business entities? Are you protected from Department of labor intrusions at some point? All those things cost money, and it's an investment that a shop that's running at a high level of quality should be spending that money. And I think recognizing that value is a big part, and something that companies should be looking at as well.
Well, to your point, Brent, a lot of the crazy ideas we come up with for things to invest money in are straight from clients' mouths of, man, I wish we could have that.
Yeah.
So in trying to innovate and trying to, grow as much as we can for our clients, there are costs, and those aren't something that you can invoice for. Those are something that we're willing to put in because we feel that it's necessary and it's a want. So yeah,
and it's value for the dollar. Just because we and other companies invest in themselves doesn't mean that the day rates automatically go up. That's not the way it works. You have to stay competitive. But again, looking at value of the group, what are you getting for the dollar spent is a big deal.
So how do we move this conversation forward? How does that take place?
Yeah, I would open it up to any of our clients or potential clients listening. Shoot us a message, shoot us a note. Are you interested in even having this conversation? Right? We are more than open to hear your side and how you go about it internally. We usually deal with you on a year-to-year basis for our rate's going to go up, our rate's going to go down. How's the industry doing? But I personally would like a better understanding of where you're coming from instead of us just going back and forth of, well, everyone else is willing to accept this, so why aren't you? Like I like knowing whys to the question, right?
Yeah. And I think there's all the I think everybody wants to cooperate, right? And we're all people and we're human and we're compassionate to that. I think the pathway to solutions to these things is conversation, right? There are a lot of things that we don't understand and we aren't exposed to that our clients have to deal with. What are pressures that they have? We want to know and understand those things. Maybe there's some solutions, opportunities, or things that we can do to help with that. At the same time, a lot of folks don't really know what it takes to run a well-oiled and professional land services group, and if you're going to ask a lot of your shop or you want to be working with a good group, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think anybody out there that's running a group, or whether it's 10, 15, 20 guys or, hundreds, they have a perspective. I think conversation, we're more than happy to talk about what it takes to run our shops. What are factors that we deal with that maybe they don't know about? And that gives them information to be able to go down the hall and pitch, represent us, because our clients are the only representation that we have to their leadership oftentimes. And if they understand the pressures that we're dealing with and why, and can articulate that in a meaningful and convincing way, well, then we've done our part. We've got a much better chance of getting support from the top if they're educated and informed and understand, what it takes to run these types of businesses and why we need better rates or why we're asking for better rates. So I guess I would close on, the more we can communicate, the better. Again, we want this to be an open conversation. It's a problem. It's something that we see coming, and we want to get out ahead of it for the good of everybody in the profession. To Steve's point, help a landman.
And number one, in that everyone can relate to, to your point of the higher ups going to the higher ups, are people, and you need people in all aspects. And we're coming from an angle of, here's what we need for our people to make them happy, to keep them here, to keep them loyal to you. That's our job. So that we're coming at you because of people. We're trying to make your people better, loyal, and consistent.
Well, all good points about the future of the field landman. Thanks for talking, guys. We'll see how this goes, and let's open up the conversation. It's just a conversation. It doesn't have to be an arms race or anything like that.
It doesn't have to be an Anchorman battle.
Yeah. We just went through a crazy election. Let's not make it that, right?
What happened? What do you mean?
What happened? All right. Good seeing you guys.
Save America Day, baby.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Khalil.
Enjoyed today's topic? Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Learn more at dudley-land.com. See you next episode.